are shorter, nights are colder, feeling like life is over. These snakes strike like a cobra. The world's hot. My son got not. Evidently, it's elementary. They want us all gone eventually. Trooping out of state for a plate. Knowledge, if Coke was cooked without the garbage, we'd all have the top dollars. Imagine everybody flashing, fashion, designer clothes, lacing your click up with diamond Vogues, your people holding dough, no parole, no rubbers, go in raw. Imagine law with no undercovers. Just some thoughts for the mind. I take a glimpse into time, watch the blimp, read The World Is Mine. And with that, we welcome you to Early Stoppage, a show where the news of the day is usually given just enough time, but sometimes not enough. I'm John Franco from SureDog, and I'll be joined shortly, as always, by Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks and Between the Links. Craig, this week we have a loaded show, new segments, old segments, new look. I started off with Nas, The World Is Mine, because this week we're going to be talking about a lot of things. If we had control of the MMA world, what would we do? So how are you?
The world is yours, John. The world is yours. And listen, I'm hanging out with my pal here, Alf on the Shelf. I mean, his time was up for this year, or for last year, so he needed something to do. He was going to be here. I lost him there for a second to whisper sweet nothings and maybe help me out with the show. But we've got a loaded one coming up. I mean, 2020 is looking great as far as fight bookings are concerned. You got a busy January, busy February. We've got an awesome show. And we talked off air. The best part of this show is that it's dynamic and it's changing every single week. We've got some pretty interesting things coming up in the next week or so, and I'm really looking forward to it. I get more and more excited about this show week over week, and let's get into it, really.
Let's get into it. We just said new segments, old segments, new look. You'd think it was a new year. We were extra motivated or something. All right, Craig. Let's start with the elephant in the room, Rampage Jackson. Your man came in at 265, and not Brock Lesnar juice to the gills 265. He came in jelly donut 265, which, as it turns out, was 25 pounds heavier than he needed to be to fight Fedor Emelianenko, who hit the scales at 240. I mean, my intention is not to just sit here and flame Rampage about his weight. There needs to be a point to all this. So here's the point. I guess I'm looking for an explanation. Is it on Rampage to come into this thing, in the words of the great Joe Martinez, fit and ready? Or does the promotion who put on Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000 have some culpability here?
Or the promotion that put on Rampage Jackson versus Vanderlei Silva 4 in 2018. Do they have some culpability? I mean, that was a co-main event in 2018, and it was absolute hot garbage. And he weighed in, Rampage, 254 for that fight. And then you look at the fights that he had before that. Chael Sonnen, that was in the heavyweight Grand Prix, he weighed 253 before that. King Mo, he weighed 253. He had a catch weight before that, 225. I talked about this earlier on this week on another one of the shows that I'm on that's not on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, so don't give that too much shine. But point being, if you're Rampage Jackson, maybe goal setting's the right thing, because for this, it was kind of like a legacy fight with Fedor over in Japan. They probably wanted Fedor to win, but you don't want him to win that way, right? So Rampage has come out after the fact. He went on Instagram. He said he's going to chronicle his weight loss journey. He's going to have another fight with Bellator and show that it was a one-off fluke. But really, the whole thing's on Rampage. I mean, you have nobody else to blame but yourself. He looked like if it was just you or I sitting on the couch eating Cheetos one day, and then the next day we're in the cage, out of breath, out of shape, not fight ready. So really, it falls on him. There's a little bit on the promotion. You know what to expect with Rampage somewhat. But, man, in 2019, he's got to change things around because that was such a poor showing.
Yeah, and he went out quick. And I guess for me, I'm assuming that Bellator and the commissions they go through are the same as UFC, and the 265 is the limit. So what would he have been in if there was no limit? So I guess I don't know what his end game is here. I mean, he's a genius if the whole thing was to spin this into losing weight and marketing it and all that. I doubt it. But I think he can turn this into a good thing if that's truly what he's saying. If he's just trying to deflect a little bit and say, the reason I didn't come in shape, but now I will. And if that's just his way to kind of get people to forget about how poorly he performed, then that's fine. But I think there's a spin here, but I'm with you, man. I think that he has a responsibility to come in. He's a legendary fighter. If you're going to keep rolling out and cashing checks, you really should be in there. First of all, you put yourself at tremendous risk by not coming in there and, fighting a guy like Fedor, not at full capacity. But I get it, I don't know. I think there's a version of Rampage that that could have at least showed a little bit better there in terms of being more prepared, right? I don't know that he couldn't have thought that being 265 was going to give him any sort of an advantage, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of set it up, and I want to ask you this question because this is really the crux of the argument that I had on the other show was for if you're Bellator and you're Rampage, does Bellator say, all right, Rampage, if you want another fight, we're gonna have it at a catch weight of 225, and we're gonna force you to really make that weight limit? Does that make sense? Because I mean, again, he's had fights at cruiserweight before. Is that something you could see them doing, or are they just fine with having off the couch Rampage at 265?
Without looking at the numbers, I would venture to say that it's the fact that he fought at 265. Should they have done it beforehand? Kind of had some sort of clause in there with him, maybe. But now it makes a lot of sense to do it because you can market him getting to 225. So I actually prefer that. I think that's the play. I think you cannot have this guy show up again. I mean, listen, he's great and he will always be, a guy that's in MMA lore for a number of different reasons. But yeah, he can't show up like that again.
No. And if we continue on and we get further down into the rundown, John, let's move on to the promotion that dominated the headlines this past week, the PFL. They're bringing on Rory McDonald, and he says he wants to be the boss of the welterweight division. I'll ask you the obvious question. Is this just kind of a cash grab for McDonald, just slotting over from UFC to Bellator to PFL, or does the division have something for him here?
That's an interesting question. And to answer that question, I'm going to give a little bit of shine to a website that I've kind of recently discovered. I don't know how accurate they are in terms of like keeping up on stuff, but let's throw them out there. Fight Matrix. One thing I like about Fight Matrix is they have this thing where you can look up rankings based on where the fighter last fought, like in what promotion, right? So if we go that route and we try and figure out like who Rory McDonald is looking at in the PFL, right? So let's just start with the obvious, which is that Ray Cooper and David Mashad just fought for the PFL championship at 170 pounds. I would say that Rory in his prime. Now we look at Rory and we keep thinking we still got prime Rory because he looks similar and he hasn't aged and he stays in shape. He's not the same guy. So let me throw it back to you in this way. Because again, the only way this isn't a cash grab is if we feel confident that the PFL has enough 170 pounders. Now here's where it gets interesting. We'll talk about this more later. They just talked about doing a huge roster cut, right? So I don't think it's a cash grab. I do think Rory likes the idea that he's been in all the different organizations and kind of understands them. He's kind of like Gegard Mousasi a little bit in that way. What do you think? Do you think it's a cash grab?
It's very interesting. I mean, we could talk about this later on. We can talk about it now. You look at two of your champions in Natan Schultz and Lance Palmer that went back to back. Natan Schultz can finish fights. Lance Palmer can, but Lance Palmer is like if Frankie Edgar's 1A, Lance Palmer's 1B. And I know it's easy to say because they train together, but they fight very similarly. Lance Palmer has a very lay and pray type of style, but at least he's active when he's on the ground. And he wins fights that way. If Rory McDonald's going to win fights in PFL, yeah, there's going to be people trying to gun for the name and they're going to try and take his head off. But if he can point fight, he can probably win some. Similar to what he did in the welterweight Grand Prix up until he fought Douglas Lima. He was able to kind of fight that way to hold his title. Of course, he had the draw against John Fitch. Overall, your question, like, is he here for the money? Yeah, that's probably a pretty big deciding factor. I mean, your three toughest fighters in that division were Magomed Karimov, who realistically should have won the whole thing if he wasn't hurt. Ray Cooper III, who has already said that he wants to have a fight against Rory McDonald. And David Mashad, who's tough as nails, but I don't know if he would particularly win a fight right now, especially if Rory's going to point fight. So yeah, it's a way to earn a lot more money than maybe you could have in Bellator. And I think it's more of a cash grab at this point.
All right, speaking of that, let's move on to the person you just mentioned, who is Lance Palmer. Craig, let's talk about what happened in the cage at the PFL on the final day of 2019. We have 4 new millionaires in Kayla Harrison, Ray Cooper, Ali Asiev, and Emiliano Sordi, and 2 repeat millionaires in Natan Schultz and Lance Palmer. Where are you at with this whole end-of-year card and the whole who do you think is – I like the end-of-year card because they had the whole social media. They had everybody's eyes. All the outlets were reporting. What do you think? Do you think that this is kind of –
This is a great question. I mean, I cut you off there. This is a great question because a lot of people were pissed off on Twitter when these PFL championships were going on. I thought it was great. I ended up watching the event with my wife. That's how we spent New Year's Eve. We're pretty cool people watching MMA on a Tuesday night. But point being, first fight, Brendan Loughnan's fighting. It's a prelim and it's not televised on ESPN. MMA fans are going to want to see that fight. Then your first fight, Emiliano Sordi and Jordan Johnson. Jordan Johnson's a wrestler, really wrestle heavy, boring type of fighter. He gets knocked out. Lance Palmer, wrestle heavy, boring fight. People complained about it. All people said were, if Lance Palmer's in the UFC, he wouldn't beat anybody. What does this matter? $2 million for what? Natan Schultz wins in a really fun fight against Loic Rajabov. Then you keep going up. You had the Ali Isaev fight against Jared Rosholt. You have Jared Rosholt on your year-end championship card on ESPN2. It was such a boring fight. And then you move up. Ray Cooper, that was a fun fight against David Michaud. That's what a lot of people were looking forward to. And Kayla Harrison against Larissa Pacheco. I scored the fight, and I think I was the only one. And I'm not crazy, but I scored at 50-42 for Kayla Harrison. That's how one-sided it was. The judges scored at 50-43 and then two 50-45s. They weren't paying attention to the fight because they were so bored. That's why they scored it that way. I'm fine with this being on New Year's Eve. That's cool. It's cool that they have it in New York. It's in Madison Square Garden at the Hulu Theater. But realistically, there's not a lot of fans there. I think it's cool. Is there sustainability here? No. Is there real engagement with this? I don't think there is. What are more MMA fans paying attention to in the summer? The start of the PFL season or Dana White's Contender Series? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a Contender Series. I don't know. PFL does a lot of stuff, man, and I think they're important to the marketplace. I think it's good they're different. I think they have they won't say lucked into it, but they have a relationship with ESPN. I've said forever they should be a feeder league for the UFC. I've gotten pushback from everybody that I've brought that up to, and I get that. But I think that people have been critical about all this investment money they've gotten, and they keep cutting these $1 million checks and the questions for what. Listen, like I said, man, I like what they're doing. I don't mind. I think that we have to have certain things on certain days. You can make the same argument about bowl games. People are like, why are people more likely to watch a bowl game on this day than a fight on New Year's Eve? And listen, they're broadcasting bars and people are at bars, so it's not like they're not getting viewed. So I like what they're doing. I do want to see kind of where the next step is, because I think each year they have to bring something new, and this year was kind of similar to last year, with the exception of Kayla Harrison. I think cutting the roster is a good idea. I think announcing it on New Year's Eve before your show is probably a bad idea. But yeah, I'm with it, man. I like what they're doing.
Then you have Mike Tyson there, and they try and introduce him, and they try and make it cool, and then Mike looks kind of awkward, and he also looks like he's wearing some type of Star Wars garb with this weird old man sweater. It was just a weird look, but we continue on, and John, another John that's much bigger than you, Big John McCarthy, said a Michael Venom Page that his resume is similar to that of Anderson Silva, and Page himself, when presented with the notion that he was a can crusher, seemed to embrace the term. How long can Bellator avoid or market the fact that MVP is probably wasting his prime right now?
I think that he's a dynamic guy, and people like to watch dynamic guys knock people out. So I don't have that much of a problem with it. If he embraces it, I'm cool with it. I don't know about the resume similar to Anderson Silva. I don't know. I agree with that. But I think at some point they got to start throwing this guy legit fighters. I mean, he's a novelty, and he is kind of different and fun, but I don't know, man. For me, I think they got to figure out what to do with this kid. And it's up to him. I mean, does he keep wanting to keep cashing big checks and not fighting the best in the world, or what's his idea? What's next for him? I'm kind of confused by where we're going with him. I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind the circus either. But when I'm there, I don't wonder what the next step is for the elephants or the clowns. I'm just there to watch. So if Michael Page is just going to be an attraction, that's fine. But if he's going to be a fighter and he has to have a future, we should probably figure out what it is.
What are big checks? That's question number one. Number two, do you get better after the age of 33 with a style like that? Because he turns 33 this spring, which can't be great. And then you look at the fighters that he's faced. You can play that Cyborg Santos knockout day in, day out. People are going to eat it up. Well, the fight that he had after that was a really, really close decision, split decision win over Fernando Gonzalez. One that Fernando Gonzalez will argue tooth and nail that he won that fight. And you'd be hard pressed to find people that would disagree. It was a really close fight. Then he beats Rickles, beats Paul Daly. I thought he lost that fight. And then gets knocked out by Douglas Lima. And then he beat Shinzo Anzai, who was 2-2 in the UFC. But really, what does that matter? He's not in the UFC anymore. And if he was any good, he'd probably still be there, and he wouldn't be over in Ryzen or the Bellator Ryzen crossover. Am I fine with the freak fights and the fun fights? No, I hate it. I think it's really stupid. To me, you're fighting with a goal in mind. If your goal is money, I get it, I guess. But for me, it's a title, personally. I think you should be striving for something bigger. And when you're fighting guys like Richard Keeley, Gianni Malillo, and Shinzo Anzai, yeah, it's great that you fought, 5 times in 2019, but what's the point?
Yeah, I think that's the big question to be answered with Michael Page. It sounds weird, but it's so simple. But when you look at the guy, it's like, what's the point? What are we doing here? All right, let's move on, Craig. Dana White this week, amid criticism over Justin Gaethje not receiving a title shot, said Justin has turned down a lot of fights. Actually, I heard this right before we came on. Justin responded saying he turned down like the Ferguson fight because of timing, and he doesn't really know where it's coming from. Now, he also said that he and Dana don't talk, and that he kind of does everything through Ali Abdelaziz, which, listen, Ali represents a lot of people, so it could be Ali doing things that are in the best interest of himself, or Justin, I don't know. But listen, Dana has recovered from undermining fighters before. But I don't understand what his angle with Gaethje is on this one. And do you think he can recover from Justin Gaethje's a different kid, man. He doesn't necessarily respond in the same way others do.
Like, he's a walking fight of the night. Why are you doing this? Like, it just looks stupid on the promotion. It looks stupid on Dana White and whoever's trying to make the matches. Yeah, they're putting him in big spots, like a Tony Ferguson spot, which you would think would be maybe like an interim belt or something if they did fight. And then it was also mentioned maybe Dan Hooker that was offered to him. And, Paul Felder took that fight in Auckland, so that's off the table. It's just an odd look. And I think, Dana's recovered from undermining fighters in the past, and he'll come out fine after this too. But it's more of a tarnish on him than it is on Gaethje. I mean, Gaethje's, he's in the prime of his career. He spent a lot of time in World Series of Fighting. He's put on some great fights in the UFC, but he's got that fighting style that, like, how many more wars can he go through, especially at the top, before you start to see him diminish? So right now he's got to capitalize on it. I think he's being smart, maybe not turning down fights, but getting the best fight possible. So I think this looks worse on Dana and the promotion that does on Gaethje.
Yeah, Dana does this thing. I like to say he puts guys on ice, right? He kind of freezes you out for as long as he needs you to be frozen. Now, typically he's able to thaw fighters out. What he needs here is for Gaethje to not be on the tip of everyone's tongue. And because Khabib's fighting Tony, number one, and if Khabib wins, Dana White wants Conor to fight Khabib. So Gaethje is just kind of in the way of that. So he doesn't want Gaethje disrupting any plans. Now, if Conor wants to tell a story at 170 pounds, that's a different story. Then Gaethje comes back into the fold. But I don't know, man. For me, I get why Dana's putting him on ice. I just think that, and he survived these things before. But I think that with Gaethje, Gaethje's stubborn enough to just kind of walk. And he was the one guy that kind of pulled out of sweating Conor for a fight. He's just a different dude. Real quick question, and this will kind of preview something we're doing a little bit later. Who's the 155-pound repeat champion in the PFL?
Natan Schulte. Should
Justin Gaethje have stayed? Because he did a hell of a lot of work to make half that money. Last I checked, Justin Gaethje's made about $860,000 in disclosed earnings, according to Tapology. I don't think that counts performance bonuses. So let's count the performance bonuses. He's got like 6 of them, right? So that's 30,000. I'm sorry, 300,000. So now he's up to 800. So he's let's give him 1.3 million for the time that he's been in there.
Or he could have had 2 million in PFL plus
endorsements,
whatever you make for a fight, plus maybe a win bonus if they have them.
So real quick, should he have stayed or should he?
It's the same question as MVP. What does it mean to Justin Gaethje? the fact that, hey, I was a UFC fighter, or is it the money, or is it competition? Like, I beat the best guys. I think to him, it's I beat the best guys right now. Right now.
It's interesting because he kind of stayed with the World Series of Fighting a little bit longer than he should have. And a lot of people, when they were criticizing him at the time, he was like, listen, I'm cashing big checks. He was managed by Ali then.
That's
Ali
it,
was the
yeah.
matchmaker. So, I mean, I get it where he's coming from with that. But this seems like a switch. And, we'll talk about a couple of guys later that had to sort of wrestle with the same thing. And we'll talk about kind of, what they decided to do and where their careers are at.
But before we do, John, let's get into the squirreliest question that we have here, and it's weird. Melvin Guillard has a fight booked with the Lights Out promotion, and he's going to look to stop. It's either an 11 or a 9-fight winless skid. Is he due for a win? What do you think here?
He's due.
Oh, I want to say, I want to preface this too. He's fighting at 185 pounds.
Yeah, he's due for a win. Little known fact about Melvin Guillard: 2 years ago, he fought Israel Adesanya. But so yeah, he's due. I wanted to bring this up because realistically, in the landscape of MMA, this fight means nothing, right? In terms of what happens, who wins, who loses. Melvin Guillard on his best day wasn't really that relevant of a fighter. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's very easy to say Rampage is hanging on too much, or this guy or that guy. Here's a guy who's like really grabbing at any promotion he can to kind of stay out there and so I guess my question for you is, what is the fact that Melvin Guillard has to still fight in the Lights Out promotion when he's on a 9 or 11 fight losing streak? Like, what does that say about the state of MMA? Is Melvin Guillard a one-off, or do you think that there's something to be said about guys sort of just continually falling down the ladder and then just grabbing onto whatever rung is available?
So his opponent coming up is Eric Lozano, who's 37 years old, affiliated with Triumph MMA, fighting out of Zeeland, Michigan. Why do I bring all this up? He fought Diesel Joe Riggs at one point in 2018. Why do I bring up Diesel Joe Riggs? Because Diesel Joe Riggs is kind of like Melvin Guillard, but Joe's still winning fights. You see where I'm going with this? I mean, there's guys that just hang on. Like BJ Penn, what's the point? I mean, I'm sure he wants to go off on a win. And he has fought good competition, like you said. I mean, let's talk about the losses. Gaethje, Brandon Gertz, Derek Campos, Chidi Njokuani, Muslim Salikov, Israel Adesanya, Maurice Jackson, Takanori Gomi, Isaac Valley Flag, and Bare Knuckle, and then Terry House Jr., who had a losing record. So it's not like he's fought cans. And he keeps fighting up weight classes, like at 170, now at 185. Is he due for a win? Yeah. Do I think it's going to happen here? Maybe not. But he's hanging on for a win and possibly a paycheck. I mean, he got arrested for allegedly beating up a mistress at a bar in, 2018? So he's had some issues outside of the cage too that you can't really forget about. But is he due for a win? Probably, maybe, I guess. I think.
All right, Craig, let's move on from the great Melvin Guillard to our sparring session for the week. We kind of touched on it a second ago. Let's look back to the PFL. They had a big week. Credit where credit's due. World Series of Fighting had plenty of holdovers into the PFL with some major talent jumping ship and guys like Justin Gaethje, Marlon Moraes. And while Gaethje and Moraes are at the top or near the top of their respective divisions, Lance Palmer is doing a damn thing at featherweight in the PFL and getting paid to do it. Success in the UFC or paychecks in the PFL, staying or going? Who made the right choice? Let's talk about this from the perspective of Moraes and Palmer because they're similar in weight and Gaethje's a star.
Yeah, I really, really like this one. And hopefully we take opposing views on this because, the best part of this segment is we don't tell each other what we're going to say. Like, we have no idea. Who made the better decision here? It's Lance Palmer. I mean, yeah, Marlon Moraes made it all the way up the rungs. He fought Henry Cejudo and he lost. And then he beat Jose Aldo and he looks great. And he's getting more exposure than he would have at World Series of Fighting. Lance Palmer has a lot of haters out there. And I have a tweet from him from today where somebody said, at Kando80 said, again, what the heck does Lance Palmer care about if he can beat anyone in the UFC? If PFL is willing to pay him $1 million to beat a no-name, I'm sure he's fine with it. And Lance Palmer said to that, match my pay and pay my bills and I'll fight anyone. So it's kind of interesting for him to say something like that. But where he's at right now, if you're almost guaranteed $1 million every single year with the style of fight that you have, and you're a quote unquote superstar or a star with PFL, why would you not do that? I mean, for Moraes, I get it. You get the exposure with the UFC, but who made the right choice? I think it was Lance Palmer here.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it was Marlon because for a lot of different reasons. I think that it's a lot of variables that come into. Lance Palmer has a style. He's a wrestler. That's his background. So a tournament benefits a guy like him. I think that he is prepared to go through these type of things. Now let's talk about Moraes in terms of when he came into the UFC, right? His first fight was Rafael Sunsao. He lost it. Now let's just say he won that. It was a split decision. Then Dodson, then Sterling, then Rivera, then a Sunsao again. Then he's fighting for the belt. So I think that, it's easy to look back and say he did not capture the belt. And I mean, listen, Henry Cejudo was the you want to talk about bosses, Rory McDonald, Henry Cejudo was the boss of that fight. But I think that had Moraes won the belt now, we would be having a different conversation. And I think it's a little bit through the conversation to say that only because he has not won the belt was it a bad idea. Because Gaethje has not won the belt, and we don't think that his idea was bad because he's going out there and putting on performance of the nights all the time. So for me, I think that, I think that Moraes made the right call. He's obviously, his profile is a lot higher than it was. And, Lance Palmer is like, he might as well be in Silicon Valley. He's a millionaire and nobody knows who he is.
And another thing that was interesting, he said, like, you look at Moraes and the way that he got to the top, he fought a who's who at 135. Whereas you look at Lance Palmer, and this isn't taking anything away from Alex Gilpin, but he fought him 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. He fought him 3 times in 2019. So you already figured out his game plan and you were able to stuff it 3 different times. It doesn't make for good TV or interesting as far as, storylines are concerned. Nobody wants to see the rubber match when you already dominated the first 2. So but I do think in saying that he made the right decision because like you said, his style benefits him for this type of tournament, and he's just cashing checks and just, playfully jumping around next because it's just a lay and pray offense.
It's weird, and I don't want to reduce this because we like to really get after it on sparring sessions. I don't want to reduce it to this, but it could be as simple as, Moraes made the right call for him and Palmer made the right call for him. But I think there's no doubt that if Moraes was still in the PFL or the World Series of Fighting / PFL, he'd have $2 million. We can agree on that. So it depends, if a couple years from now we're seeing him at fighting for lights out, I'm sure he's going to wish he had stayed in the PFL. All right, so let's move on to another new segment, Craig. Time to make some tough choices with our segment, This or That. I'll begin. Conor's next opponent for a title will be Kamaru Usman or Khabib Nurmagomedov?
Khabib Nurmagomedov. Do I have to elaborate?
You do, of course. Why wouldn't you? That's all we do on this thing.
Okay, that's fair. Because it looks like what they're setting up would be a fight between Usman and Masvidal for later on, like late spring, early summer type of territory, like maybe a May or June. And it's looking like if Conor beats Cerrone, he moves down to 155 and fights Khabib. There's no intermediary in there, whether it's an Usman or, Nate Diaz, obviously not, because you had Masvidal beating him. So I know a lot of people want to see a third fight between Conor and Diaz. It's probably not going to happen. And if he wins, he's probably going to go back down to 155. That's what I think.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it's Kamaru Usman because for me, I think that Conor's on a 170-pound track. I think everybody says, listen, it's the holidays. We don't want Conor to cut weight. I think that the reason why Conor's fighting at 170 pounds is so
he can
that,
look good in tight shirts on Instagram.
There you go. So alternatively, if he loses at 170 pounds, 155 is still available. If he fought someone else at 155 pounds, you can't book the Khabib rematch. If he loses to Donald Cerrone, you just say, hey, he's not a 170-pound fighter. He fights 55. If he wins against Cerrone, now it opens up the Masvidal fight. It opens up the Usman fight. I think Conor is trying to, he's handling this brilliantly. He's fighting a guy big enough and name and size-wise to cover this 170 pounds and give him both tracks if he wants them. In my opinion, this is John Franklin's opinion, I think Conor should never fight Khabib Nurmagomedov again in his life. There's too much money to be made in other fights with other people. I think he wants the BMF title. I think he wants the 170-pound title. There's no – if he beats Khabib, all he gets to do is hang Khabib on his wall. That's it. He just gets a belt that he's already won.
Hot Takes Exposed? I hope they pick that up and they run with it in a year, because you're absolutely bananas to say that he shouldn't take a fight against Khabib. Hey, biggest payday in the UFC that's only a very small percentage, probably in the single digits compared to the Mayweather fight. Don't take that. Take a fight against Kamaru Usman. That's really going to sell. That's going to be a hot and heavy pay-per-view.
I like that we got after it more in this than sparring sessions, but I'll just remind you that if you look at the top 5 pay-per-views, they all belong to Conor. So whoever he fights, Kamaru Usman, Kamaru Jackson, Rampage Jackson, it's all going to do money. So it doesn't really matter. All right, let's move on. Craig, the flyweight champion at the end of 2020 will be Joseph Benavidez or Henry Cejudo?
It's going to be Brandon Moreno.
You got to do this or that. Come on.
We talked about this one on the special edition, ending of 2019 before 2020 episode of Between the Links, and we had to name who was going to be the flyweight champion at the end of the year. Not having Cejudo in there, and I said it was going to be the assassin baby Brandon Moreno. I, honest to goodness, I think he's going to win his next fight. That's the number 1 contender fight, and then he's going to go in and take on either Benavidez or Figueiredo, and he's going to beat that fighter, and maybe he takes another fight before the end of the year. But I see him winning. I see 2020. This is a guy that left the UFC, fought one time, if I'm not mistaken, back in LFA, got a win, came in, and now he's looked awesome, especially against Marcel Dor's favorite, Askar Askarov. So I will, again, to use the verbiage once more, fight tooth and nail for Brandon Moreno to be the champ 2020. I think it's going to happen. But if I had to pick between the two, Henry Cejudo.
Okay, I'm going to take Henry Cejudo as well. Maybe we should rename this segment This, That, or the Other Thing, because you just got the other thing. All right, so this or that, I'm taking Cejudo as well. I think he likes being double champ. I think if he has the availability to go down there and listen, as much as Joseph Benavidez is liked in the UFC by the UFC brass and fans and the connection to Megan O'Leary and all of it, I still don't think that he's a star. And I think Dana is going to want to try and get as many stars as he can in as many divisions. If this kid Moreno turns out to be a star, then that'd be great. If Benavidez wins it, Moreno takes it, and then Moreno and Cejudo fight, I think that'd be a great way to put Moreno over potentially. So, but even if they do, I still think that Moreno's not there yet, so Cejudo would win. So for me, at the end of 2020, I'll take Henry Cejudo. All right, Craig, up next. John Jones's next non-light heavyweight opponent will be Stipe Miocic or Israel Adesanya.
Stipe Miocic. Easy. Why? Why would you ruin Israel Adesanya? Listen, I know it's not that far back in the past when Anderson Silva would do one-off fights at light heavyweight and then go back to middleweight. And yeah, there was always a chance that he was going to lose at light heavyweight, but he went back to middleweight and kept wrecking shop until 2013, which we covered. But John Jones, if he goes to 265, I think there's a good chance he beats Stipe. Israel Adesanya goes up to 205. I don't think he beats John Jones. I really don't. And then there's a lot of questions at middleweight. How's the fight going to go? If he loses, do you have to bring in another interim title at 185? We've had too many of them. So I think it makes more sense to have Jones fight Miocic, and I'm more interested in that fight. I want Israel Adesanya to be a star at 185 for a long time. Can I be selfish?
No, you can be selfish. Listen, it's looking like 33 minutes into this podcast before I mention Chael Sonnen, so here it comes.
Oh boy.
Chael Sonnen says that if you're going to call somebody out, you do it up a weight, not down a weight. A lot of people believe that. Okay, so I think that maybe John Jones would look at, and I worded the question interestingly here because I think that if Israel Adesanya fought John Jones, it'd be at light heavyweight. He's just a non-light heavyweight.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that Jones has some business at heavyweight. He keeps talking about, he's bulking up and his next fight's at 205. And yet he's saying he's 230 pounds with a six-pack, which is insane. Because if you're 230 pounds with a six-pack, how the hell are you going to make 205? So, but I think here's why I think I agree with you that it's Miocic. Because why would you tell me that you're 230 pounds with a six-pack unless you were trying to get me to believe that you could make the heavyweight limit and still be yourself?
It's a weird thing when you have a fight booked for early spring to defend your belt at 205 too.
Right. So I think that he's just kind of putting that out there, and that's why, to sort of drum up interest in a fight with, listen, there's a trilogy fight that's going to happen at some point, and it's between Miocic and it's between Cormier. And I know that everyone says that this is it for Cormier, but man, if that Jones trilogy is hanging out there at heavyweight, it's hard to say no.
Exactly.
All right. Speaking of heavyweight, let's talk about two heavyweight prospects Who will be the first of these two fighters to get a title shot? Greg Hardy or Jairzinho Rozenstruik?
This, that, or the other. Cyril Gane. Everybody knows how
All
hot
right.
I am on Cyril Gane. So really, I think he could be the champ by the end of 2020. I honestly do. It all depends on how things shake out with Jones and Cormier and Miocic and Rozenstruik and Ngannou. But I think Rozenstruik loses to Ngannou. Greg Hardy is going to win a couple fights. I think Hardy's probably closer to a title shot by the end of the year than Rozenstruik. But that's not to take anything away from Rozenstruik. He had a great 2019, especially the fact that he came in somewhat late to the year, but the amount of wins like Albini to Arlovsky and then to continue and finish Overeem. It seems like every year at the end of the year, Alistair Overeem just gets hit by a train. And that train this year was Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But I think Greg Hardy's probably going to be closer to a title shot by the end of 2020.
Yeah, I think the thing that gets forgotten, certainly not by you and I, but by a lot of people, is that, you look at Alistair Overeem's lip and you think this guy's a killer. Well, he wasn't looking that great for most of that fight. And I think that while I have also my doubts about Greg Hardy, one thing I do not doubt about Greg Hardy is the UFC's desire for him to be a star and for him to kind of sort of make his way through the ranks. So I think if either of them is going to get a push, like who has a clearer path, I would say Greg Hardy, only because at present Rozenstruik's path is obstructed by Francis Ngannou. That's a huge deal. So I mean, listen, if he goes ahead and knocks out Ngannou, then I'll sit up straight and pay more attention to this guy. But he didn't look good against Overeem, and I think that it's interesting in the way that he looked bad against Overeem that they immediately book him with another striker. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. But I think
he's a great kickboxer. Rozenstruik is. You can't take that away from him. I mean, Overeem looked better than him for the majority of the fight until he got the finish, but you can't deny how big of a star he is at home. I don't know if you saw the video on New Year's Eve of Rozenstruik and Suriname, and they had him like kind of up above a sea of people. Like it was insane. It's great to see that he's a star there, and hopefully, you can see MMA growing in some of these markets that, maybe you're not thinking of off the top of your head. Like PFL was pushing Loic Rajabov in that title fight against Schultz because he was from Tajikistan, and they had the UN ambassador to Tajikistan like behind the scenes showing him on camera. They showed him sitting there in the stands. They had I want to say it was like the UN ambassador to Uzbekistan over with Ryzen. So it's neat to see some of these countries, with MMA growing in popularity. But to answer the question, Greg Hardy, clear road to the title shot.
And if you can answer who the ambassador to Tajikistan is, Craig will give you an autographed Nickelback CD. Autographed by Craig, not by Nickelback. All right, Craig, new segment alert. So the other day I was thinking about F, Marry, Kill. And for those of you who don't know, the way F, Marry, Kill works is you're given three people and you choose who you would F, who you would marry, and who you would kill. So here's an example that I'm going to give Craig with three Canadian beauties.
Oh, I haven't seen this yet. Oh, boy.
Avril Lavigne, Alanis Morissette, Pamela Anderson.
I would marry... Now, her new music that came out this week, I don't like it that much, but I would marry Alanis Morissette. She's lovely. She's an older gal than I am. She's probably double my vintage. F, probably Avril Lavigne. You got to worry about Lyme disease, but I go with Avril Lavigne there. And I'm not a big Pam Anderson fan. She had her heyday in the 90s. Yeah. All
right. So then the spirit of that, we introduce Keep, Promote, Cut.
I look bad. You don't have to answer it.
Yeah. I guess I should answer it. Okay. All right, man. That's a tough one. I think that I would probably, effing Pamela Anderson's a risky proposition. Man, that is bad for business. I think I'm going to stick with the way you went. I think marrying Alanis, she's a little closer to my age. Effing Avril and killing Pamela. That's bad. Man, this sounds a lot worse when you do it on the podcast than when you just do it. Killing Pamela Anderson. All right, so again, in the spirit, we're going to do Keep, Promote, Cut. I'll give you three fighters, and you tell me who the UFC should keep, who they should promote, and who they should cut. Let's start in the heavyweight division. Alexei Oleinik, Tai Tuivasa, Marcin Tybura.
Should also say that the way that you pick some of these fighters was based on recent performance, right?
Yeah, so most of these guys have lost two of their last three or three of their last three.
Yeah, Olenek kind of had like this weird run to the top where he was finishing guys and had Ezekiel chokes. Tai Tuivasa has zero fight IQ, and Marcin Tabora, they just booked him in a fight with Sergey Spivak, who just beat Tai Tuivasa. So I think you should probably promote the former KSW champ or M1 Global champ in Tabora. You keep Tai Tuivasa, even though he's lost what? Is it 3 or 4 now? It's a number. It's a number. And Alexei Olenek is quite a ways over 40. He fought your man Chael Sonnen at 185 back in the mid 2000s in Bodog fight. You cut him.
All right, I am going to say, I think that you, because for me, the way to figure this out to me is you promote the guy that you think has the greatest upside. You keep the guy that you think can make a gatekeeper, and you cut the guy that's already gotten
I know where you're going.
That's already gotten a shot, right? So for me, I'm going to promote, oh man, I'm not crazy about Olenek. I'm going to promote
Tickets for trains because you've slowed this one down.
I'm going to promote Olenek. I'm going to keep Tybora, and I'm going to cut Tuivasa. Just because of who Olenek's fought. He's fought the bigger names.
Yeah, it's not like they had Tai Tuivasa at the bigger pay-per-view of the year doing shoeies, or one of the bigger cards of the year doing shoeies, and that was 3 weeks ago.
I hear you.
And actually, I know the guy whose shoes he got. He's from Fredericton, which is kind of crazy. So shout out to Steve there. The next one, I might as well profile it. We're still at heavyweight. We're cutting maybe half the heavyweight division, or promoting them or keeping them. Ben Rothwell, Juan Adams, Andrei Arlovsky. Cut, keep, promote.
All right. So I'm keeping Andrei Arlovsky. I'm promoting Juan Adams, and I'm cutting Ben Rothwell. There's just too much problems with Ben Rothwell. He's a weirdo. He just keeps doing stuff that I don't like. And I think you got to keep Arlovsky around because he's a former champion. He's someone you can use as a measuring stick. And Juan Adams is a personable guy. I don't know that if his fighting is ever going to, but he's a guy you can roll out there against prospects. You put him out in front of people. I think there's honestly, I see Andrei Arlovsky popping up in all these weird, like, this guy does a video like he was in Masvidal's video. Andrei Arlovsky, I think, has a hell of a book in him because he's been in all these different gyms. He's been around forever, but that's another. I don't know that anybody's able to tap into that. But yeah, I would promote Adams, keep Arlovsky, and cut Rothwell.
Yeah, I like the logic there. I think we've seen Juan Adams on the desk before. I know that was before his fight with Greg Hardy. After the fight before that, and he has the onesie, personable guy, whatever. His nickname's a Kraken. That's kind of cool. And he's a big guy. Like, he's a really big guy at heavyweight, which is neat to see. Ben Rothwell is an oddball. Even when he wins fights now, like when he beat Stefan Struve, he was losing that fight, and Dan Miragliotta basically coached Struve to lose, which is strange. And then Andrei Arlovsky, I have nothing for him. Andrei Arlovsky is not good anymore at all. So if it was me, I would keep and promote Juan Adams, and I would cut Rothwell and Arlovsky. But you need warm bodies, so you might as well keep Arlovsky.
I don't even know why we give these segments a structure. I don't even know why we come up. I go through all this painstaking trouble to put these things into some parameters, and then you just come here and you just destroy them.
Like a pro on roadkill. I just pick it apart.
Exactly. It's like I built this wall and then you just run a car through it. I don't understand why. All right, let's move on. Next, let's talk about our man Frankie Edgar. The interesting thing was I went out of my way to find a picture for the graphic with that hair. All right, so this time we're going to talk about keep, promote, and cut Frankie Edgar, Renato Carneiro, and Jeremy Stephens.
Okay, this one to me is easy. Jeremy Stephens is what, a sub 500 UFC fighter now, but he puts on fight of the night performances, so you keep him. Moicano's not old. He's not super young, but he loses big fights. But you can still promote him because he can finish guys. And he almost finished Brian Ortega that one time, and he was beating him until he got finished. Frank Edgar is, you talk long in the tooth, man. This guy with hair is not good. This guy with short hair is not great. He's old. I know he's a former champ. You can still market him. Like, he's going to go to 135, and maybe one day he fights Corey Sandhagen. But out of these three, what's left for Frankie Edgar, really?
Yeah, I think for me, I like who Moicano's fought. I kind of like, so I'm gonna keep him. Here's where it gets interesting for me between Stevens and Edgar because I think they're both finished. So I take that back. I'm gonna promote Moicano. Now I just need to figure out who I'm gonna keep. Edgar and Stevens. I do think that Frankie still has some value in his name, and I still think he can go out there. Now, listen, the last one, I don't know what to tell you, but I think that. So I'm going to keep Frankie. I'm going to promote Moicano, and I'm going to cut Stevens because I've had enough of Stevens. So
All right.
It's time for him to go.
Let's
All right,
move to
finally,
170. 170.
let's do 170. This is the one with the biggest names. So
you've got
at
a 155er, 170, and Anthony Pettis is going back down to 155 in his next fight. You've got Wonderboy Thompson, and you've got the former champ, Robbie Lawler. What are you doing here?
Yeah, this is an interesting one.
Two former champs.
Because typically guys who have names this big don't get cut. And they're all old enough that who do you promote is what I think gets interesting. I think that Stephen Thompson is good for the brand. I think he's good for the division. I think he's got an odd style, but he has too odd of a style to promote. I think Anthony Pettis, although he's hit and miss in his fights, he put on a great fight against Nate Diaz. So for me, I'm going to promote Anthony Pettis. I'm going to keep Wonderboy Thompson, and I'm cutting Robbie Lawler.
Robbie Lawler fought in a main event in his last fight. How crazy is that? And he's on a losing streak.
I know.
Robbie Lawler, what's left at 170 other than like maybe some legacy fights? Put him up against like Carlos Condit? Is that fun? Do people want that? I don't. But I don't know what you do. Like other than that, what do you do? So yeah, I agree.
Let me ask you a Robbie Lawler question before you finish going. Do you think that the UFC should, in any way, try and preemptively have these Bellator fights that would occur if the fighters left? So you're talking about legacy fights. UFC has kind of gone away from that recently. They've had their moments where they're still willing to do them, but they're kind of getting away from them. That seems to only occur in Bellator now. So do you let these guys leave and let the Bellator use their shine to kind of bring some eyes, or do you keep them around and put them on a fight night?
No, do like what you did with BJ Penn his last fight, and do like Ryan Hall. I know this matchmaking doesn't make sense, and there's another fighter out there, but it's the first one that comes to mind and is ranked. Damian Maia. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, he throws looping hooks, he gets in there, and he finishes you. Like, he chokes you out. That's what he did to Askren in his last fight. It was a main event, too. Given somebody like that, I'm not a big fan of the legacy fights. I get it. So maybe you do that. But to answer the topic at hand, I cut him, which is sad. Wonder Boy's kind of old, but he's still good, and he still moves well. And then Pettis is your former champ. Man, Wonder Boy's got this weird thing where people really like him. So I would say promote him and just keep Pettis. You've already got him fighting not Cesar. See, I messed up. Carlos Diego Fea at 155. So you still got some lineage there at 55. Just keep bringing him out. You don't have to promote him too much.
All right, here we go to our last segment of the night. It's Start the Conversation, Craig. Let's tip our cap to MMA Reddit. Typically this time of year, we have year-end awards, predictions for what's to come, and dream fights for the year to come. Mr. Danny Segura of MMA Junkie tossed out a list today of 20 fights on our MMA wish list for 2020 that included some entries like Carlos Condit versus Nick Diaz and Paul Daly versus MVP. So perfect world. Chips on the table. If you could go all in on a fight happening in 2020, what are you going with?
How hot do you want me to get, John? Because I'm putting on my sunglasses here. Am I going full hot take, or am I going just easy with something that's probably going to happen?
Full hot take. I'm going full hot take, so you better as well.
Full hot take. You know what? I know this makes for good radio or good podcasting. Let's bring up the lightweight division. Because there are a couple fighters here that I want to see make it all the way to the top and then some. If I actually, you know what? Screw it. You want full hot take? I'm going to give you full hot take. I want to see a UFC KSW matchup, and I want to see Roberto Soldic. I want to see him fight Jeff Neal's an easy one. That's one. Jeff Neal and Soldic. But who's the hardest hitter you can think of at welterweight? Put him up against Soldic. I want to see that fight. I want Soldic to pass a drug test, but I want to see that fight.
All right, if you had Craig makes a hipster pick in your early stoppage bingo, go ahead and mark that off. So I'm going to go a little bit more casual than that. I'm going to go with GSP and Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's the fight I want to see in 2020. If I think if Khabib gets through Ferguson, and I'm going to go ahead and say my other fight, which has kind of been talked about more and more likely now that Dana seems to be a little bit more on board. I want Masvidal against Conor at 70. I want GSP against Khabib at 55. And then if Conor goes on to fight Kamaru Usman and get the 70 belt, let's just have all the guys involved in this go ahead and fight each other. The winners get to fight. Masvidal beats Conor. He gets to go to 55 and fight Khabib if he wants. GSP wins. He fights Conor. Masvidal. That's what I want. I want 55 and 70 to get sorted out with all the big names involved. I almost want a Bellator-style Grand Prix. Just put all these guys in one big tournament, and whatever comes of it, comes of it. Because that's what I'm interested in seeing in this new year. I want to get to it. We only have so many more years with GSP. Enough with all the back and forth and shit on the underground. Let's get to it. He's training, and I think that it's time to book the fight if Ferguson and Khabib. Either way, I'd be cool with the matchup, but certainly if Khabib wins. So if Khabib beats Ferguson, give me GSP Khabib.
So going out of left field a little bit more. So I want Soldic, Jeff Neal, because Neal's fast with the hands. I also want Soldic, Tyron Woodley. I think that's a fun one, even though Woodley has a fight coming up. These are fun fights. I want Rodolfo Vieira to pop up and fight a guy that I talk about every single week. He is my Chael Sonnen, your Chael Sonnen to my Damian Maia. I want Vieira and Maia at 185. And I'm going to keep the hot take sunglasses on again because I want another BJJ guy. And I want Fabricio Verdum to fight Gordon Ryan at 265 pounds. So make that happen, whether it's in the UFC, Ryzen, lights out, I don't care. These sunglasses are coming off now because that's the hot takes that you get from me on this lovely 2020 Thursday evening.
Another one I want to see, Kron Gracie Ryan Hall.
Yeah, that's fun.
I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. I really want to see.
I want to throw this in there. Danny threw this out there in his article, so I think it's worth mentioning. His number 20 was Dylan Dennis and AJ Agazarm in Bellator, which is similar to that Ryan Hall matchup with Kron Gracie, especially because Dennis is SBG, Agazarm's with the West Coast Snake Diaz crew, and so is Kron Gracie. So I think they all kind of play pretty well.
Interesting. I'm going to throw a question out to you that's kind of, completely out of nowhere, but I just thought of it the other day. Yeah. It was something I was putting together for a Hitting the Speed bag we're going to do coming up. Who's your favorite Gracie?
Well, that's an easy one. I'm going to say what everybody's going to say. Do you like the skinny Gracies or do you like the bodied up Gracies? Because I like the bodied up Gracies, so I'm going Hicks and Gracie.
Hicks has been my favorite for a while, man, but Henner's a close second. I like Henner. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, do you like that video where Henner has that stupid backpack where you could hide an avocado?
I like that backpack. I thought about getting one. Jesus, man. This is their okay boomer moment of the week. Me saying I like the Henner Gracie backpack is as okay boomer as I get.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, and that starts the conversation. Those are two of our picks for fights we'd like to see happen in 2020, and there are a lot of great ones out there. So now we'd like to hear from you. Hit us up, whether it's in a Reddit thread or on Twitter or Instagram, SM Cornerman, or at Craig Allen FMP on Instagram. Okay, guys, there you have it. The 13th episode of Early Stoppage is in the books. Be sure and comment, subscribe, and like us on YouTube. Be sure to also listen to all the other content on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, including the Not Safe for Work podcast with Kyle Steele and Fred Kirby, Between the Links, hosted by Mike Heck and starring an all-star cast of writers from around MMA, including Davidson Baker, including Craig Allen, including Keith Schillen. Also, the Loudmouth MMA Recap Show with myself and Keith Schillen, the Breakdown Show with Max and Marcel, and MMA Yesterday with Kyle Steele and Keith Schillen. Craig can be followed at Craig Allen FMP. I can be followed at SM Cornerman. The fight has been stopped. We'll see you next week. Craig, say something witty.
I muted myself. You know why? Because it's a new year and it's a new me, and you're going to be seeing these hot take sunglasses more often. Whether or not you might love them, you might not. I'm going gangbusters on 2020. Loudmouth's on the way to the top. And I'm going to be doling out hot takes. So get ready for those on Instagram and Twitter. It could be good. It could be bad. I mean, we could really derail this show. Let's see what happens.
That's the plan. The plan is to derail the show. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Too far.